sahabat Lensa Kita, berjumpa lagi dengan saya Echa di podcast Lensa Kita. Di episode kali ini sudah ada yang kayaknya ini baru pertama kali lihat atau ada yang berubah dengan bintang tamu kita. Kenapa ini kok bukan Jum'at GKMI Surakarta lagi? Karena di episode kali ini kita kedatangan tamu special guest. Ada dua bapak ini. Siapakah mereka? Mungkin sahabat Lensa Kita yang datang di ibadah atau ikut online streaming di ibadah minggu lalu sudah mengerti siapa mereka ini. Tapi yang belum mengenal, nanti kita akan kenalan dan kita akan berbincang-bincang tentang topik yang sama di bulan ini, yaitu tentang bulan misi. Dan di episode kali ini kita akan berbicara tentang perdamaian. So, karena ini bule-bule, mereka tidak mengerti apa yang saya ucapkan. Sahabat Lensa Kita bisa lihat mereka bingung melihat saya apa yang saya ucapkan. Oleh karena itu kita akan switch bahasa dari bahasa Indonesia ke bahasa Inggris. Oke? Nanti sahabat Lensa Kita bisa baca di bawah untuk terjemahannya. Mari kita switch bahasa dari sekarang. Okay, please introduce yourself, both of you, to the viewers, to our viewers. What's your name and where do you come from and what do you do in your life, and any story that you had in Indonesia for this past week, any funny story, interesting story, or anything you want to share with our viewers. Yeah, please.
Jonathan, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, my name's Jonathan Bornman, and what a joy to visit Indonesia. I've never been here before.
Yeah.
And as I've gone around the city with Michael and your father, Paulus, I've noticed one thing very special about Indonesia. People smile.
Oh, yeah.
And they're happy. And a couple days ago, he and I were trying to record something on the street, a short video clip. And this old woman with her bicycle full of fruits and vegetables wanted to sell us some fruits and vegetables.
Oh, yeah.
And she talked and talked and talked. And it never seemed like it dawned on her that we did not speak Indonesian. She just kept talking and smiling and was so happy.
Yeah.
And we kept smiling back and, couldn't say anything, but we smiled.
Yeah.
I'm a disciple of Jesus and a person like you participating in God's kingdom in the world. I work as a missionary at Eastern Mennonite Missions, and I lead a team of persons devoted to Christian-Muslim relations. So our mission is to equip Christ followers for a life-giving relationship with their Muslim neighbor through dialogue, witness, peacemaking, and hospitality. We do that at home in the United States, and we do that in many places around the world where we have partners and friends working on those kinds of things.
So, I'm Michael Hostetler. It's a delight to be here. Like Jonathan, I've been very impressed with how friendly people have been with us, even people that we've never met before on the street, and even people here at church. It's been wonderful to be able to connect with our sisters and brothers here in Solo. An interesting story for me was that each morning, Jonathan and I get up early in the morning and we go out for a walk. And I told Jonathan, we need to get Becca to come with us. Because I don't like to just walk up and take a picture of somebody. If they understand why I'm taking a picture, then I can do it. And having somebody who can speak to help me explain that is important. But this morning, as we were walking, we saw a man sitting by a cage, and I couldn't resist. I had to take a picture. So I took my cell phone, pointed at him, and he said, "Yeah, it's okay." He was feeding his monkey, and we don't get to see monkeys very often. And so this morning it was kind of special to see him caring for his monkey. His pet, exactly. I have worked with photography for many years. I freelanced and I worked with photojournalism for about 20 years maybe before we went to Israel for a number of years. And gradually, I got into filmmaking. And for me, it's all about story. So people often ask me, what kind of camera should I get? And I say, it's not the camera, it's the eye. It's what you see. And the camera is simply a tool to help you capture what you see and to share that with other people. Most of my work has been church related. I've told stories of people all over the world. Latin America, Europe, Asia, Africa. And I think it's really important in order to connect with our faith family and to be inspired by the stories that are out there. And so the stories have been all kinds of stories of God's people at work. That's what we're doing.
So we are still in our mission month. In this episode, we will talk about other missions. And we know that to this day, fighting for and maintaining peace is still a challenge, for us. And this is one of our common missions as agent of peace in the world. So, talking about the word peace, what is your opinion on this phrase?
We live in a really violent world. There are wars going on right now in multiple places, and as an American, I'm really sad about the recent school shooting, and then just the week before, shooting at a grocery store. It was a racially motivated shooting. So I think when I look at the whole world, I think, wow, there's a lot of violence. But then if I look again, I see so many people that are working to make their neighborhood peaceful, to bring peace to their country or in their family. So I see that both are very much with us. There are peacemakers, and there's a tremendous amount of violence.
I think of the huge need for stories that deal with peace. I think sometimes we lack the imagination as to what we can do even. The issue seems so big, and I think it's easy to get paralyzed. What can I do? I'm just a little somebody, and what difference can I make anyhow? But I think we can make a big difference right where we are, how we relate with each other. And I think the way I see what Jesus taught is that peacemaking is at the heart of what we are called to be. So as followers of Jesus, I think it's central for us to be in right relationship with Jesus, first of all, as our Lord and Savior, as a people committed to following the way of Jesus. But I think that as we relate then to our communities, anything that we can do that helps foster good relationships will contribute to the way of peace. And I think sometimes it's hard for, we can talk more about this later, but it's hard for people to imagine that there can be an alternative. In other words, the world thinking is that if there's violence, we need somehow more violence to stay on top of it. But it never works that way. Because more violence means more people are hurt, more people are angry, and where's the peace? I think we have a special gift that helps us to live. It gives us tools to know how to live, that then can make a difference for our communities. I think that world peace maybe is not a good starting point. I think we need to say, okay, what does it mean for peace to happen within my community? Because as we begin to experience peace with little things, then we begin to imagine how we could do this on a bigger scale. And I think that's really important. So if that's the case, then you can, and Jonathan can, I can, do something within my community. How I relate with my family speaks to the people around me. How I relate with my neighbors, with my community, can say an awful lot about what it means to make peace.
The important thing for me is we need to make peace with ourselves first.
Of course.
Because if we do that to ourselves, so we can continue to do it to our neighbors, our friends, our families, and our community too, and our world too. It starts from ourselves first.
The good news is that if we do our part, God will do God's part.
Yeah.
You know, we're only asked to do what we can, no more.
Yeah, what we can, and God will do the rest.
That's right.
So, how is the practical thing to create peace in your country? Since we are different here, maybe in Indonesia we do this, and in the States we do this.
I'm working hard at relating to the people on my block in my part of the city where I live. So there's about 9 houses side by side, and my wife and I are trying to learn to know the names of all the people that live in those houses, and to spend time visiting with them. It sounds like a really small thing, but it actually takes effort. It would be so easy to just come home, park my car, walk in the house, and not talk to my neighbors. But Carol and I try several times a week to sit out on the porch or take a walk slowly up the street and chat with our neighbors and say, how's it going? What happened this week? And how's your daughter? Oh my, she's growing up so much taller. I actually think that's the heart of peacemaking. If you know your neighbor's name and then something bad happens, you can go and help them. Or if you're having trouble, they will come help you. We had a shooting on our street just, 2 months ago. And one of the people that witnessed that shooting was a young refugee boy from Syria. He was standing on his porch, and some American teenagers got angry, and one pulled out a gun and started shooting. And this boy stood on his porch and watched it all happen. I know his father, and I know the boys. And so I spent time on 2 occasions now talking with them and asking them how they're doing. They're fine. But just to emphasize how much that violence can come right next to your own home and how important it is to know your neighbors and talk with them. Knowing and being known is part of peacemaking, because it's part of how we reveal God's love for our neighbor by actually loving them ourselves.
You mentioned that it's really important to make peace with ourselves. And that makes me think of a story in my life about how one time my mother said to me, Michael, can't you not complain so much? And I thought, I was maybe 12, something like that, 13. And it was about then that I read from Philippians 4, where Paul says, I have learned to be content no matter what the situation. And I remember thinking so clearly, this is how I want to be. I want to learn how to be content with what I'm given and what I have. And I think that's part of being at peace as well. If we're always complaining, always wanting this or that, that doesn't feel very peaceful to me.
Yeah.
And so over the years then, that is something that I've worked at on a personal level. I think sometimes it's a bit annoying to people because they say, can't you complain a little bit? And so I prefer to be that way than the other way around. Somebody who's always complaining. I think we have so much to be thankful for if we look at it, even if our situation's difficult. You know, I've traveled all over the world and I've talked to many, many people, and I'm always impressed with how people have been able to be grateful for what they have, as opposed to if only I had more. You know, so I think that's one quality that I think if we are grateful for how we in our faith community can support each other, that's part of being at peace, and it's part of living a life that will speak to those around us. You see,
I live in the city of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, not far from Philadelphia, and our city has received a large number of refugees from Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, the Congo, and quite a few other places. In fact, so many that the BBC recognized our city as the city in the United States with the highest number of refugees per capita. And so there's a need to help these persons settle in our community in a good way. And we have a problem in our community. There's a lot of people that are afraid of new immigrants, and especially afraid of someone with a different religion. Many of the refugees that come are from Muslim countries. And so the work that our team focuses on is to help churches grow in their ability to welcome and receive refugees. We've developed a Bible study course. Actually, Michael and I worked together on that. So for a period of weeks, a church group can go through this Bible study that would help them understand a Bible text, and then a way they might apply that in their own community life. And at the end of the Bible study course, then we offer to take the church group to a local mosque for a visit. So a church recently, a few months ago, went through that process, and then I took them to the mosque, and they were so surprised to learn what a mosque looks like, and that the people inside were friendly. So it's a very practical thing that we can actually, there's things we can do to create peace. In this case, we're fighting against Islamophobia. But much more than that, we're actually teaching our fellow church members how to live like disciples of Jesus when they encounter someone of a different faith.
that makes me think of a time when there was a shooting in a mosque a couple years ago. I don't know if you remember, but anyhow, one of my friends from church and I decided to go to the mosque and to just stand with them, saying, we're sorry that the Muslim community has to suffer with this. It's so unnecessary. It's really sad when it happens. And it was really interesting because there we sat, to the edge of the group, and when the imam was done, he says, "Can you come up front and talk to us?"
Oh.
So we were not planning on that, but we had to say something. And bottom line is that the people really appreciated that we came and we cared enough to stand with them, to somehow say this is wrong and we are feeling this with you. So I think it's really a very basic human thing that Jesus calls us to meet people where they are and to say we care.
So, are there any things that are different with how Indonesian people face diversity compared to your country?
Well, in a week's time, it's hard to give a lot of differences because we haven't seen enough to, or at least I haven't seen enough to say. But in the past year, I've worked with a production called Transmission, and I saw very clearly some ways that the church here has much to teach us. From the Indonesian perspective, that can be helpful to our church in Canada, where I live. One of the people that we worked with was Hani. And Hani went to Tempur. It's a small village up in the mountains in the region of Jepara, I think it is.
In Japan.
Yeah, and so she said some things that I thought were very profound. It's very simple on the one hand, but very profound. She talked about her experience in the village. I think it was her first time there too, but she went because there's a Mennonite church and a mosque. But some of the things that she experienced, I thought were very revealing and very helpful to me personally, and then as I talk to people, I can share that. She said that when she went into the village, she realized that she could see the face of God in every face. She said it didn't matter if they were Muslim, Christian, these were beings that God created. And therefore she was able to see the face of God. So on one hand, that's very simple and I think very profound.
Yeah.
She talked about how our job is to love and to show that love as we relate with other people. So she combined seeing the face of God with the additional mandate, our calling, to express love with each other. The other thing that she mentioned, or experienced, was that in that city there was a mosque and there was a church. And the interesting thing about it is that the church went through a major renovation of the building. And the Muslims found money and also support with the construction. So the Muslims helped build that church.
That's fantastic.
And the mosque also went through renovation, and the church provided workers to help build the mosque. That's pretty amazing, I think.
Helping each other.
Yes. Even though we're so different, we have many things that we feel are important, but connecting with people where their needs were was a lesson for me. One last thing I would say, Adi was the other person that we worked with. And I said, what's it like to relate with Muslims when you're such a minority and there's so many more Muslims? And he looked at me and said, it's not even a question. He said, those are my Muslim brothers. So he was relating at that level and saying, if we can figure out a vision that we both care about, then we can do something about it. We can work together for that. Adi didn't say that we should be more Muslim. No, he was saying, Jesus calls us to meet where people are at, and if we can, work at making whatever the situation is better. So he said, my friends and I both agree that we need peace. And so this is something that we can work together on. It means that when we work together, we learn to know each other. We learn, it's only when that happens that we begin to know even how to talk about what happens inside. If I have a friendship and I can work with that person, then what I say matters and what they say matters. But we have the opportunity then to say, Jesus has this impact in my life. And it's because of my call to love, it's my call to serve, whatever it is, the situation. It makes it possible for those that I'm relating with to see God's love at work. If we go and preach and say, people just push back. They might be polite if you're lucky, but they say, "Oh, that's nice," and they walk away, and that's that. Yeah. But if we want to make a difference, I think it's about relationships. What we were saying earlier, and so in my experience, these are several examples of how profound what the Indonesian church has to offer is. You see what I mean? So I think it's my experience with the Indonesian church is one of immense excitement, because I think I've seen, and I've also shared with those around me, well, Indonesia, they do this. And so I've been able to be specific about some things that I've learned from the church here in Indonesia.
I don't hardly know anything about Indonesia. I'm a new visitor here, but I'm struck by how many similarities there are between Indonesia and the United States. They're both large countries, big population. Both countries seem to love technology and digital life, and both countries have many different religions and different languages. So I'm find myself sitting here thinking that as disciples of Jesus in the United States or Indonesia, we find ourselves part of a minority community that is learning how to relate to a large pluralistic world with goals and purposes that are often very different than what Jesus calls the church to. And so I think that's a real challenge for us, is to be in touch with our community and the culture that's around us, and figure out what it means to be a disciple of Jesus with a meaningful interaction with my community. So I think that would be something that we share. Mennonite Church Solo and my Mennonite Church, Mount Joy Mennonite Church in Pennsylvania, we're both trying to figure out, how do we have a relevant witness in the place we live?
So the Bible verse that will be the base of this episode is from Romans 12, verse 17 until 18. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. So, how would each of you respond to this first?
That's really hard to do. I want to do that, but sometimes things happen where I get upset or don't like what somebody else did. Sometimes my neighbors are not so nice. We've had a number of occasions where our neighbors were shouting and fighting and very violent sounds coming from our next door neighbor's house. And my wife and I are thinking, what do we do, and how are we supposed to relate to these people? Should I go say something, or what should I do? So these are really good words to reflect on. What can I do that will allow me to live at peace with everyone on my street? And I find that challenging, but also very joyful, because as we've focused on learning to know our neighbors' names and their activities, we've really grown in relationship, and so I have a sense of peace when I walk down my street, because they know me and I know them. And so that's how I'm trying to work at it.
I think that in looking at the big picture, when Russia invaded Ukraine, I remember how quickly people took sides. One person that I talked to said, the Russians were backed into a corner. And so he said, he understands. He said, if China were to move to the Mexican border, that U.S. would feel very threatened and they would come out fighting. And this person that I was talking to said, that's how Russia feels, because the NATO and the U.S. are on the border of Russia. And so they're making Russia feel very threatened. But the thing that comes to my mind, and it connects to this verse, scripture, is that in the end, one wrong doesn't justify the other. One evil doesn't mean that you can be evil to the other again. You know, the person I was talking to said, look at what the U.S. did in Iraq. People suffered, children died, it was so awful. So they cannot say, well, with Iraq we need to, protect. So that's one way that I think about that situation, that somehow we are not justified in saying we're going to use more force to stop Russia in this situation. In the end, you make more enemies.
Yeah.
You only make things become more complicated, more difficult. I'm not trying to say I have solutions for that situation. It's very, very complicated. But I think that on a very personal level, as I look at my relationships in my community, I think it's really not productive to say, you did such an awful thing, I'm going to do something awful to you too. It just doesn't help.
I'm thinking of, we recorded another documentary earlier this year, and we interviewed a couple. And this couple had a terrible family conflict. The husband's inheritance was taken away by his angry brother, and then they had 17 years of conflict between them, something like that. And as they told their story, I realized that sometimes for making peace, doing everything that you can to live at peace with your neighbor is actually costly. So they eventually said, we give up our rights. We give it away. In a sense, they turned the other cheek. And they let the other person win. Later, God blessed them with another property, and even better, with reconciliation with their family. But as they told their story, the thing I learned from them is that this way of living, being at peace with everyone, can sometimes be really costly for the person who chooses that way of life.
The other, I think, learning that can come from that is that in the end, what they have is even better than what could have been. You know, they have started a ministry which they call House of Light, and over the years they've been able to help women who have abusive husbands and children who have needs. They've done prison ministry, and it seems as though God has blessed them way beyond. If they had said, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to, they were able to break out of the bitterness that they felt. The husband said, actually his wife said, he would scream in his dreams. She'd wake up and there he was screaming because of his deep anger. He said, I hated my brother. And so she said, you have to overcome that and ask for forgiveness even for feeling bitterness towards her brother. Do you know how hard that is? Yeah. I think we all have families, we all have people that matter to us. I think when we have pain, when we have bitterness, one way of finding healing is to, in this case where Jonathan was talking about the family, is to even ask for forgiveness. Which is very hard because you say, well, I'm entitled to be bitter. Look at what my brother did.
Yeah.
But I think in the end, if we live in bitterness, we are hurting ourselves. And to overcome that with the grace of forgiveness is a powerful, life-giving experience that we can have when we are able to commit to that.
So in your opinion, both of you, would a person need to change their mindset and action to create peace? Or just came like boom, I create peace?
One of the basic principles of being a Christ follower is about dying to yourself and living for Christ. So a Bible verse that has been really impactful for me over many years is, I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. That's Galatians 5, or Galatians 2:20. And I think if we want to have peace, we do need this inner transformation. And we need Jesus' help. Even people who don't know Jesus, who are not Christians, if they want to be involved in peacemaking in a serious way, they do have to give up selfishness and live for others. So it's one of the wonderful benefits I feel about being a Christ follower and having Jesus as my Lord and Savior is that He helps me die to myself and live for God's purposes.
I guess the way I come at it is that I think our relationship with Jesus is something that is constantly becoming. Where I am at today is not where I was 10 years ago. And so I think that's the exciting part about it. You talk about change, do we have to change? I think, do we want to change? Because I think the process of becoming like Jesus, which is our calling that Jonathan just talked about, is a joyful thing. It's something that gives us deep meaning. It's a gift that we have as people who commit to following Jesus. It's something that gives us a purpose in life, and it also gives us handles on what to do in situations that are very difficult. So yes, I think that do we need to change? I think change is inevitable. Change happens because if we're faithful, we begin to see and experience a new joy, a new purpose in life.
Thank you so much, Michael and Jonathan, for spending time with us talking about peace. Good luck for the documentary that both of you are working on right now. Have a safe trip back to your country.
Thank you.
And we will be here waiting for your comeback.
Okay.
To produce the film. And I will switch it back to bahasa Indonesia. Terima kasih juga untuk sahabat Lensa kita yang sudah menonton, mendengarkan dari awal sampai akhir. Tetap ikuti terus podcast Lensa kita yang akan tayang setiap 2 minggu sekali di channel YouTube GKMI Solo dan juga Spotify Lensa Kita. Tetap patuhi protokol kesehatan karena pandemi masih belum selesai. Tetap pakai masker. Terima kasih, sampai jumpa dan God bless.